Undergoing chemotherapy, I truly understood the meaning of being abandoned. My own children ignored my calls. My husband moved to the guest room and then chose golf over my oncologist appointment. I said nothing. But that day, as the IV dripped, I remembered an old love. If you've ever been cast aside when you needed family most, listen to my story. Like, share, and let us know where you are listening from. The sterile white walls of the infusion room seemed to mock the vibrant life Eleanor once knew. At 62, her body was a battlefield, ravaged by chemotherapy, but it was the silence of her phone that truly echoed her suffering. Each drip of the intravenous fluid was a cold reminder of the poison coursing through her veins, a poison meant to save her, yet it felt like it was stripping away everything she had, including the love of her family. She would glance at the small screen, hoping for a flicker of light, a notification, a name. Her daughter Chloe, a high-flying lawyer, always seemed too busy for a call. Eleanor had left countless messages, gentle inquiries about her day, small pleas for a moment of connection. Each time the response was a curt text, if anything at all, often simply, "Can't talk now, client meeting." Her son, Daniel, was a whirlwind of fatherhood, perpetually distracted by the demands of his two boisterous children. He'd pick up the phone, the din of youthful chaos always in the background, promising to call back as soon as the little terrors are asleep, a promise that never materialized. Then there was Beatrice, her sister, who lived only a few towns over. Eleanor often imagined Beatrice's kitchen, fragrant with the aroma of home-cooked meals, a stark contrast to the bland hospital food or the tasteless broth Eleanor forced herself to swallow. She tried calling Beatrice last Tuesday, hoping for a simple chat, a shared memory, anything to break the crushing solitude. "Oh, Eleanor, not now, darling," Beatrice had chirped, her voice light and oblivious. "Arthur's just walked in the door, and his dinner won't cook itself, will it?" The receiver had clicked, leaving Eleanor listening to the dial tone, a sound colder than any winter wind. It was always Arthur, always his dinner, always his needs that came first. A gentle hand on her arm startled her from her reverie. It was Clara, the nurse, her eyes kind and knowing. Clara adjusted the IV line, her touch reassuring. "You're doing so well, Eleanor," she whispered, her voice a balm. "Some families, they find it hard. The illness, they pull away." Clara didn't need to say more. Eleanor felt seen, understood. Yet the acknowledgement only sharpened the pang of abandonment. It wasn't just some families, it was her family. Eleanor swallowed, her throat dry, the metallic taste of medication lingering. She saw it now with chilling clarity. Her cancer wasn't a crisis that drew them closer. It was an inconvenience, a messy, demanding inconvenience that threatened to disrupt their carefully constructed, comfortable lives. She was no longer the steady matriarch, the strong pillar they leaned on. She was a burden, an awkward presence, a reminder of mortality they preferred to ignore. And then there was Julian, her husband of 40 years. He hadn't just emotionally distanced himself, he had physically moved. The guest bedroom, once reserved for visiting relatives, had become his sanctuary, a quiet retreat from the reality of her illness. The shift had been subtle at first, a suggestion about better sleep, but it had solidified into a permanent arrangement. He moved through the house like a ghost, his presence almost imperceptible, his absence deafening. The ultimate betrayal had been that morning. Her oncologist appointment, a crucial check-in on her progress, on her very survival. She had asked Julian if he could come, a small, tentative request. His response had been immediate, accompanied by a dismissive wave of his hand. "Oh, Eleanor, I can't possibly miss my golf game today. You know how important my weekly foursome is. It's vital for my mental health, darling." Mental health, she thought bitterly, as if hers didn't matter, as if her life wasn't hanging by a thread. She had tried calling him later, from the doctor's office, after receiving news that was both hopeful and terrifying. The phone rang, once, twice. Then Julian's cool, professional voice answered. "Eleanor, is everything all right? I'm in the middle of something important here." His tone was polite, distant, utterly devoid of warmth or genuine concern. "Yes, Julian, I just wanted to tell you about the appointment." She trailed off, realizing the futility. "Look, I can't talk now. I'll be home later. We can discuss it then, all right?" He hadn't waited for her reply. The click of the phone echoed in her ear, a familiar refrain of dismissal. True to his word, he arrived home later, slipped into the guest room, and the promised discussion never happened. The exhaustion was a heavy cloak, weighing down her bones, her spirit. Fighting cancer was a battle she had braced herself for, but fighting it alone, completely isolated, was a torture she hadn't anticipated. Each day was a Herculean effort to simply exist, to breathe, to hope. Yet hope felt like a luxury she couldn't afford. A sudden buzz made her jump. Her phone screen lit up. Chloe. Eleanor's heart gave a hopeful flutter, only to plummet as she read the message. "How's treatment going?" Dad just asked. Not her daughter's genuine concern, but a hollow, obligatory inquiry prompted by Julian, who couldn't even bring himself to ask directly. It was the final straw, a fragile, desperate thought pierced through the fog of her despair. Samuel, her childhood sweetheart. The boy with the kind eyes and the easy laugh who had always made her feel like the most important person in the world. He was a ghost from a lifelong past, a memory buried deep under decades of marriage and family. But in this suffocating emptiness, his image surfaced, a beacon of what might have been, of a love that was once unconditional. Her hands trembled as she reached for her old mahogany address book, tucked away in the bedside drawer, a relic from a bygone era. Flipping through the thin, yellowed pages, her finger traced faded ink, past names she no longer recognized, past numbers that surely belonged to non-existent lines. And then, there it was, Samuel Peterson. His name, a fragile link to a past where she felt cherished, loved. A desperate hope flickered, a tiny, defiant flame in the vast emptiness of her solitude. The old address book lay on the bedside table, a silent challenge. As the last rays of sunlight bled from the sky, Eleanor's initial surge of courage to call Samuel began to wane. The weight of years, of a life she'd built with Julian, pressed down on her. What would she even say? After decades of silence, a sudden call would seem desperate, perhaps even delusional. She pushed the thought away, telling herself to focus. Her primary battle was with cancer, not with ghosts of the past or present marital anxieties. Today was a day for survival, for enduring the next round of chemotherapy. The sterile scent of the hospital parking garage was all too familiar. Eleanor navigated the concrete maze, her body already weary, anticipating the hours ahead. As she rounded a pillar, a scene unfolded that froze her in place, stealing the last vestiges of warmth from her already chilled spirit. Julian stood there, his back to her, but his posture, his whole being, radiated an unfamiliar tenderness. He was leaning down, his lips pressed gently against those of a young woman. The world seemed to tilt. Every ignored call, every distant glance, every excuse Julian had offered for his absence suddenly clicked into a terrifyingly clear picture. The woman was young, impossibly so, with dark hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail and a radiant smile. What truly twisted the knife in Eleanor's heart was the sight of her attire. Crisp blue scrubs. She worked here in this hospital. The very place where Eleanor was fighting for her life, where she was at her most vulnerable, Julian was finding solace, or perhaps something more. Eleanor watched, hidden by the shadows of her car as Julian pulled back, a soft, intimate smile on his face. He stroked the woman's cheek, his fingers lingering, a gesture he hadn't bestowed upon Eleanor in what felt like an eternity. Then he laughed, a deep, genuine sound that resonated through the cold concrete structure. It was a laugh Eleanor hadn't heard directed at her in years, a laugh brimming with unburdened joy and affection. The sight confirmed her deepest, most unspoken fears. His distance wasn't about her illness, it was about someone else. Later on the oncology floor, Clara, her kind nurse, approached, her brow furrowed with concern. "Eleanor, you look terribly pale today." "More than usual." Eleanor forced a weak smile, dismissing the observation. "Just a bad night's sleep, Clara. You know how it is." She couldn't bring herself to confess the truth. It was too raw, too humiliating. But a seed of suspicion had been planted, demanding answers. "Say, Clara," Eleanor began casually, trying to keep her voice even. "I thought I saw a new face in the hospital today. A nurse, I think. Quite striking, Dark hair, probably in her late 20s, early 30s. Clara tilted her head thoughtfully. Oh yes, that sounds like Sarah. She's a fantastic new addition to the cardiology ward. Very popular with the patients and staff alike. Why do you ask? Eleanor merely shrugged, a hollow ache growing in her chest. No reason, just curiosity. Sarah. The name solidified the image, making the betrayal feel even more concrete, more personal. As the chemotherapy drugs dripped into her veins, the usual weariness was compounded by a profound sense of futility. What was she fighting for? This grueling, relentless battle against a disease that threatened to consume her. Was it for a life with Julian, a man who was already slipping away, building a new future with someone else? The chemicals that were supposed to be her salvation now felt like a cruel joke, a meaningless sacrifice. If Julian was planning his escape, what was the point of enduring this pain, this suffering, this constant nausea? After her treatment, instead of heading straight home, Eleanor found herself driving aimlessly. Her car, almost on its own accord, navigated streets that held echoes of her past with Julian. The park where they'd first picnicked as young lovers, the old cinema where they'd shared their first kiss, the quaint bookstore where he'd bought her first edition of her favorite novel. Each place, once a cherished memory, now felt tainted, overshadowed by the fresh wound of his infidelity. She was searching, not for answers, but for a reason, a clue as to when their love had truly died. Her melancholic drive eventually led her to Miller's Diner, a greasy spoon they'd frequented in their younger, poorer days. The aroma of stale coffee and frying onions filled the air, a nostalgic comfort that briefly soothed her. She ordered a weak tea and sat in a booth by the window, watching the world go by. That's when she saw her again. Sarah, the woman from the parking garage, sitting at the counter, her dark hair shining under the diner lights, a phone pressed to her ear. Eleanor's heart hammered in her chest, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. She watched, her breath hitched, as Sarah's face softened, a private smile blooming. "I love you too," Sarah murmured into the phone, her voice just loud enough for Eleanor to catch, even over the diner's din. "See you later, my love." The words, so casually spoken, yet so devastatingly powerful, were like a physical blow. There was no longer any doubt. The man on the other end of that call was Julian. Leaving the diner was a blur. Eleanor paid mechanically, her vision hazy, her legs shaky. She drove home in a daze, the full weight of Julian's betrayal crushing her. She found him in the living room, ostensibly absorbed in a newspaper, a veneer of domestic normalcy draped around him. He looked up as she entered, offering a strained smile. "Eleanor, darling, you're home. I was just thinking of ordering some Chinese. How does that sound?" His voice was overly cheerful, too eager. As he turned, a faint smudge of pink lipstick on his crisp white collar caught her eye. It was almost imperceptible, a tiny speck. But to Eleanor it screamed betrayal. His offer of Chinese food, a peace offering, a familiar routine, now tasted like ash. It wasn't an act of love. It was a gesture of guilt, a desperate attempt to maintain his facade. Without a word, Eleanor retreated to her bedroom, the walls suddenly feeling oppressive, suffocating. She closed the door, shutting out the pretense, the lies. The truth, stark and brutal, settled over her. Julian wasn't merely having an affair. He was planning his escape. He was preparing a future, a life that didn't include her. The exhaustion of her illness paled in comparison to the emotional depletion of this crushing revelation. Her eyes landed on the mahogany address book, still resting on her bedside table. Its presence, once a source of hesitant reflection, now felt like a defiant call to action. With trembling fingers, Eleanor picked it up, flipped to the yellowed page, and finally, after decades of silence, she dialed Samuel's number. Eleanor's hand trembled as she held the phone to her ear, the old rotary clicks echoing the passage of time. One ring, two, three, then a voice. "Hello?" It was Samuel. His voice, though aged, was instantly recognizable, carrying a warmth she hadn't realized she'd desperately missed. It was a voice that offered immediate, unexpected comfort, like finding a forgotten, beloved blanket on a cold night. "Samuel, it's Eleanor," she managed, her voice cracking slightly. A beat of stunned silence, then a gentle intake of breath. "Eleanor? My goodness, Is that really you? It's been decades. His voice was laced with a genuine surprise that quickly softened into concern. Are you all right? The question, so simple, yet so profound in its sincerity, unleashed a torrent within her. All the suppressed pain, the loneliness, the humiliation bubbled to the surface. No, Samuel, she confessed, the words tumbling out. I'm not all right. I've been diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer. I've been through 4 months of chemotherapy, and, and Julian is having an affair. The last part was a whisper, a stark, painful admission. Silence stretched across the line again, but this time it was different. It wasn't the silence of abandonment, but one of profound shock and sorrow. Eleanor, I'm so terribly sorry to hear that, Samuel finally said, his voice husky with emotion. About the cancer, of course, but about Julian too. That's truly awful. His concern felt real, a stark contrast to the hollow platitudes she'd become accustomed to. She found herself recounting the details, the words pouring out, unburdened. He moved into the guest room months ago, she explained, the bitterness sharp in her throat. He said it was so he wouldn't disturb my sleep, but I see now it was just a convenient way to distance himself, to make room for her. Samuel listened patiently, silently, until she finished. When he spoke, his voice was low, laced with a quiet anger that was almost palpable. That's unconscionable, Eleanor. To abandon you, to behave so selfishly when you're fighting for your life. I don't even have words. His indignation was a surprising balm, a tiny flicker of satisfaction in her desolate heart. It almost made her smile, this unexpected champion emerging from her past. She continued, the narrative of her loneliness unfolding. My children, they're no better. Chloe's always too busy. Daniel's distracted with his kids. Beatrice, my own sister, prioritizes Arthur's dinner over my need for company. I go to chemotherapy alone, Samuel. Every single time. The raw vulnerability in her voice was stark. Alone? Samuel repeated, his voice incredulous. That's simply not right, Eleanor. No one should face something like this by themselves. There was a pause, then he asked, his tone serious and direct. What's the prognosis, Eleanor? What are the doctors saying? The genuine interest in his voice gave her strength. She took a deep breath. The chemotherapy has done its job on the tumor mostly, but it's also damaged my bone marrow. My body's not producing enough healthy blood cells anymore. I need a bone marrow transplant to survive, Samuel. The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken fear. She explained the desperate search for a donor. They always look to immediate family first. My children, my sister, they were supposed to get tested. A wry, bitter laugh escaped her. Chloe, the busy lawyer, said she couldn't spare the time. Daniel said he'd think about it, which meant he wouldn't. And Beatrice, who lives an hour away, claimed she had a fear of needles. Unbelievable, Samuel muttered, his disgust evident. Julian, Eleanor continued, her voice flat. He actually got tested. Surprisingly, but he wasn't a match. She paused, a strange thought forming. Now, after what I saw today, I almost see that as a blessing. The thought of him being my salvation, it's too much. So what happens now? Samuel asked, his concern unwavering. I'm on the National Donor Registry, she explained, but my blood type, it's quite uncommon. The chances of finding a match are already slim, and the waiting list, it's long, very long. The unspoken implication of the delay, the dwindling time, hung heavy in the air between them. A silence followed, long enough for Eleanor to start regretting her call, regretting burdening him with her troubles. Then Samuel spoke, his voice firm, resolute. Eleanor, tell me, where can I get tested? What do I need to do? There was no hesitation, no question of inconvenience, no mention of odds. It was a simple, direct offer of help. Tears welled in Eleanor's eyes, hot and unexpected. Samuel, you don't understand. The odds are so slim. Even for siblings, it's a small chance, let alone a childhood friend. In the process, it's complicated. There's a lot involved. She tried to temper his enthusiasm, to protect him from the inevitable disappointment. But Samuel wouldn't be dissuaded. Odds don't matter, Eleanor. It's the right thing to do. If there's even a fraction of a chance, then it's worth it. Please tell me. Who do I contact? What's your doctor's name? She gave him the information, the name of her oncologist, Dr. Hayes, the hospital's phone number. As she hung up, a strange, fragile feeling blossomed in her chest. It wasn't joy, not yet, but it was hope. A tiny, defiant spark in the darkness, kindled by the unwavering kindness of a man from her past. A man who, unlike her family, saw her, truly saw her, and offered his hand without question. For the first time in months, Eleanor felt a tremor of something other than despair. Eleanor, still reeling from Samuel's unconditional offer, found her voice again. "Samuel," she began, a tremor in her tone. "Why? Why would you do this for me after all these years? We haven't spoken in decades." The question was born not of suspicion, but of genuine bewilderment. His kindness felt foreign, a stark contrast to the neglect she'd grown accustomed to. Samuel chuckled softly, a sound that brought a warmth to her chest. "Eleanor, do you remember senior year of high school? When I got mono right before prom?" A faint smile touched Eleanor's lips. "Of course, you were so miserable." "And you," Samuel continued, his voice tender, "you were there every day. You brought me my homework. You brought me chicken soup your mother made. You read to me from that dreadful history textbook. You never once complained, even though you missed out on all the prom planning and parties. You just cared." He paused, letting the memory settle. "That's who you are, Eleanor. You're inherently kind. You don't abandon people when they're in need. You never have." His words painted a picture of herself she hadn't seen in years, a version of herself Julian had long since forgotten. "I've often thought of you, Eleanor," he admitted, his voice gentler now, "even after all this time. And I always knew deep down you deserved better than Julian." The quiet affirmation of her long-held, unspoken belief sent a wave of emotion through her. "I regret it, Samuel," she confessed, the words raw and laced with a profound sadness. "Choosing him, I regret it every single day. Look at the misery it's brought me." "No, Eleanor," Samuel interrupted gently but firmly. "Don't ever say that. The cancer, the affair, your family's selfishness, none of that is your fault. Not a single bit of it. You didn't choose any of this. You're a good woman and you deserve kindness and love." They talked for another hour, the years between them dissolving with each shared word. Samuel spoke of his life, a quiet existence as a retired high school English teacher in a small coastal town. He spoke of his beloved wife, Victoria, who had passed away 5 years prior after a long illness. His voice softened with affection as he remembered her, and Eleanor listened, sensing the deep love he still carried. He lived a simple life now, he said, surrounded by books and the gentle rhythm of the sea. Eleanor, in turn, found herself sharing more than she had with anyone in years. She spoke of her passion for gardening, a joy that had brought her so much solace over the decades. "I used to spend hours in my garden," she reminisced, a hint of her old self creeping into her voice, "creating beauty from simple seeds and dirt. But now, with the treatments, I just don't have the strength. It's all overgrown." "I remember your mother's garden," Samuel interjected. "It was magnificent. And you had such a knack, even then. You could take the most ordinary things and make them beautiful, Eleanor. You always could." The compliment, so genuine and specific, warmed her to her core. It had been years since Julian had offered such a heartfelt observation. Years since she'd felt truly appreciated for something other than her domestic duties. Still, a lingering discomfort gnawed at her. "Samuel, I truly appreciate your offer, but I don't want you to feel obligated. It's a huge commitment." "Obligation?" Samuel scoffed lightly. "Eleanor, I told you I still care for you deeply, always have. This isn't about obligation. This is about doing what's right for someone I value." Then he paused and his voice took on a softer, more reflective tone. "You know, Victoria knew about you. My first love, she used to call you." Eleanor's breath hitched. "She would tease me sometimes. In a loving way, of course. She knew you were special." Eleanor was stunned. She had never considered that Samuel's wife might know about her, let alone that she would be so understanding. "She sounds like a remarkable woman," Eleanor said, genuinely moved. "She was," Samuel agreed, a wistful note in his voice. And on her deathbed, Eleanor, she made me promise something. A promise that has stayed with me every single day since." He paused, and Eleanor leaned closer to the phone, her heart pounding with anticipation. "She made me promise that if you ever needed me, if you were ever in trouble or needed someone to simply be there for you, I would find you and I would care for you." The revelation left Eleanor speechless, tears streaming down her face. Victoria, a woman she had never met, had possessed such incredible foresight, such profound wisdom and empathy. And Samuel, true to his word, was honoring that sacred promise. His commitment wasn't just for her, it was a testament to his enduring love for Victoria, a love so strong it extended beyond death. "So you see, Eleanor," Samuel continued, his voice firm and unwavering, "I am going to get tested. For you, because you deserve to be cherished and fought for, especially now. And for Victoria to honor her last wish. This isn't an obligation. This is a promise kept." As they finally ended the call, Eleanor felt a warmth spread through her chest, a feeling she hadn't experienced in years. It was a warmth born not just of hope, but of recognition, of being valued, of a love remembered and kept alive through the decades by a man of profound integrity. The weight of solitude, though not entirely lifted, had been momentarily lessened by the unwavering, unexpected support of Samuel. If you're finding Eleanor's journey compelling, don't miss what happens next. The twists and turns are just beginning. Keep watching. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe so you don't miss any part of her story. The phone call with Samuel left Eleanor with a profound sense of lightness she hadn't realized she was missing. The crushing despair and pervasive fear that had been her constant companions for months began to recede, replaced by a fragile but undeniable sense of hope. It was a feeling so foreign, so unexpected, that it felt like sunshine breaking through a long gray storm. The next morning, she awoke with a clarity she hadn't experienced in ages. Instead of succumbing to the usual routine of self-pity and languor, Eleanor pushed back the covers with a decisive sigh. She walked to the kitchen and, for the first time in what felt like an eternity, brewed a pot of real coffee instead of instant. The rich aroma filled the quiet house, a comforting scent that awakened dormant senses. She even made herself a piece of toast, savoring the simple act of chewing, the texture of the bread. The shrill ring of her phone startled her. It was Chloe, her daughter, her voice tight with what Eleanor recognized as superficial concern. "Mom, Dad just called. He said you sounded different. Is everything all right?" Eleanor knew Julian had prompted the call, a performative act to assuage his own guilt. But Eleanor's tone was different. It was calm, steady, infused with a newfound strength. "Everything is perfectly fine, Chloe," she replied, a subtle defiance in her voice. "In fact, things are looking up. I've decided to take care of myself. I'm no longer waiting for others to do it for me." Chloe paused, clearly taken aback by her mother's composure. "Well, that's good, Mom. I was actually thinking maybe next week I could finally get tested for the bone marrow donor registry. I've cleared my schedule a bit." Eleanor almost laughed. "No need, darling. I've found a donor." The words were delivered with a quiet finality, cutting off Chloe's belated offer. You found a donor?" Chloe stammered, clearly surprised. "Who? How?" "That's not important right now, Chloe. What's important is that I'm taking charge of my health and my life." Before Chloe could formulate another empty platitude, Eleanor, for the first time, took control. "I need to go, darling. I have things to do." And with that, she hung up, a sense of empowerment coursing through her. For the first time in months, she felt a profound sense of control over her own narrative. She looked forward to her next treatment, not with dread, but with a quiet sense of purpose. She wanted to share the good news with Dr. Hayes, to witness the hope reflected in his eyes. On Monday, the day of her next infusion, Eleanor dressed with a renewed sense of pride. She chose a soft blue sweater, a color that always made her eyes sparkle. She even put on a touch of lipstick, a small act of rebellion against the cancer that had tried to strip her of her vibrancy. As she looked in the mirror, she saw not a victim but a survivor, ready to face the world. Clara, her nurse, immediately noticed the change. "Eleanor, you look wonderful today. There's a sparkle in your eyes I haven't seen in a long time." Eleanor smiled, a genuine, radiant smile. I think things are finally turning around, Clara. I've found a potential bone marrow donor. A childhood friend, Samuel. He's getting tested this week. Clara's face lit up. Oh, Eleanor, that's truly fantastic news. That's wonderful. As the chemotherapy solution dripped into her veins, Eleanor no longer felt the cold sting of loneliness. Instead, a comforting warmth enveloped her. She pictured Samuel, somewhere across the country, undergoing the tests, his unwavering promise echoing in her mind. She wasn't fighting alone anymore. She had an ally, a champion, someone who cared. The call came on Wednesday afternoon. It was Dr. Hayes. His voice, usually so measured, was tinged with an unmistakable excitement. Eleanor, I have extraordinary news, truly extraordinary. Eleanor's heart hammered against her ribs. Yes, doctor? Samuel Peterson, Dr. Hayes declared, a note of awe in his voice. He's a perfect match, a 10 out of 10. This is incredibly rare, Eleanor, especially from someone outside of your immediate family. It's almost a medical miracle. Eleanor sank onto her bed, clutching the phone. A perfect match? A miracle? The news was almost too overwhelming to comprehend. Shock gave way to a wave of profound relief, mixed with a healthy dose of disbelief. A 10 out of 10? She whispered, her voice barely audible. Yes, Dr. Hayes confirmed. This means we can move forward with the transplant much sooner than anticipated. We'll need to schedule some immediate consultations to prepare you. This is truly the best possible outcome. He continued, his tone softening. Eleanor, your fighting spirit, coupled with Samuel's exceptional generosity and this incredible compatibility, is what's making this possible. Having such strong support is paramount for a successful recovery. A whirlwind of emotions swirled within Eleanor, gratitude, wonder, and an almost dizzying sense of elation. Without a moment's hesitation, she hung up with Dr. Hayes and immediately dialed Samuel's number. He answered on the first ring, his voice eager. Eleanor, did you hear? I heard, Samuel, she exclaimed, a joyous laugh escaping her lips. Dr. Hayes just called. You're a perfect match, a 10 out of 10. I know, Samuel practically shouted, his own excitement palpable. They just called me. Can you believe it? I mean, I hoped, but I never truly expected a perfect match. His joy was as unbridled and genuine as her own. In that moment, surrounded by the silence of her home, Eleanor felt a connection that spanned decades, a bond that promised not just life, but a future she hadn't dared to dream of. Samuel, I don't know what to say, Eleanor stammered, tears blurring her vision as she clutched the phone. This is everything. This is my life. How can I ever thank you? The words felt inadequate, flimsy in the face of such a monumental gift. There's no need for thanks, Eleanor, Samuel replied, his voice gentle yet firm. I'm honored to be able to help. Truly, this is what I want to do. He paused, then his tone grew more serious. Dr. Hayes mentioned the transplant timeline will be moving very quickly now. How are you feeling about that? Are you ready for it? Eleanor took a shaky breath. It's daunting, but I understand the necessity, and I know there are risks for you, Samuel, with the donation. They explained the procedure. Her voice was laced with concern for him. I know, Samuel affirmed, his conviction unwavering. I've done my research. I understand the pain, the recovery, the risks, and I'm choosing to proceed, fully knowing what it entails. My decision is made, Eleanor. His resolute commitment brought the question to her lips once more, a quiet echo of her past, bewildered queries. But why, Samuel? After all this time, why? He chuckled softly, a familiar warmth in the sound. Eleanor, do you remember that last conversation we had, right before you decided to choose Julian? The memory, though painful, was vivid. She remembered the heartbreak in his eyes, the quiet dignity of his acceptance. Yes, she whispered. I told you then, Eleanor, that you deserve to be cherished, to be loved without reservation, to be put first. That promise, that conviction, it never had an expiration date. His voice softened, imbued with a deep, enduring affection. And my love for you, it never truly stopped, Eleanor, not in all these years. Even Victoria knew that. Eleanor couldn't hold back the sobs that racked her body. Samuel, she wept, the regret of her past choice crashing over her with renewed force. I made such a mistake. I wasted so many years. Shh, Samuel soothed. Don't dwell on what's past, Eleanor. We have to focus on the future. And as I told you, there's another reason for all this. He reiterated Victoria's dying wish, the selfless mandate she had given him. She made me promise, Eleanor. If you ever needed me, I was to find you, and I was to be there for you. She knew you were special, and she knew I loved you. She understood. Eleanor was utterly overcome. The thought of Victoria, a woman she had never met, having such profound empathy and foresight, moved her deeply. It was an act of kindness so pure, so selfless, that it transcended the boundaries of life and death, binding her to both Samuel and Victoria in a way she could never have imagined. They began to discuss the logistics. The transplant was scheduled for the following week. You'll need to be here the night before, for pre-op, Eleanor said, trying to maintain a practical tone despite her swirling emotions. You can stay at my house, of course. I have a guest room. Actually, Samuel interjected, I'd rather stay in your house. The guest room, that is. It'll be nice to have company, and I can keep you company too, before we head to the hospital. He was thinking of her, as always. Eleanor smiled sadly. Julian won't even notice, I'm sure, she mused, a bitter undertone in her voice. He spends most of his time in there anyway. It's his sanctuary from me. The thought that her husband would be oblivious to the man saving her life, sleeping just down the hall, underscored the vast chasm that had opened between them. Samuel arrived on Thursday afternoon, a travel bag in one hand, a grocery bag in the other. He was older, of course, with streaks of silver in his once dark hair and laugh lines etched around his eyes. But those eyes still held the same profound kindness and warmth she remembered. He brought fresh fruit, some organic vegetables, and a tin of homemade chocolate chip cookies. Victoria's recipe, he explained, a soft smile on his face. She always said a good cookie could solve almost anything. They settled into comfortable conversation, the ease of their youth returning as if no time had passed. They spoke of the upcoming surgery, the anxieties. Are you scared, Samuel? Eleanor asked, her voice hushed. About the procedure, the pain? Samuel met her gaze, his eyes reflecting a quiet strength. Of course, there's a little apprehension, but honestly, my biggest fear isn't for myself, Eleanor. It's for you, for your recovery, for what you've already been through and what's still ahead. His concern was unwavering, a steady anchor in her turbulent world. He was doing this for her, purely and completely. As the evening deepened, Eleanor found herself confiding in Samuel, admitting the raw, gnawing terror that had been a silent partner in her fight. I'm terrified, Samuel, she whispered, her voice barely audible, about the surgery, the potential complications. What if it's all for nothing? What if I go through all this and it doesn't work? The fear of ultimate failure, of having endured so much only for it to be in vain, was a heavy cloak. Samuel gently took her hand, his touch warm and reassuring. Eleanor, nothing done out of care, out of love, is ever for nothing. Whatever the outcome, we face it together. And we will fight, you and I. Together. He squeezed her hand. Remember our old mantra, take it one day at a time. We did it then, and we'll do it now. His words, simple yet profound, resonated with a deep truth. They brought her back to a time of youthful challenges when they had faced school exams and teenage dramas with the same shared resolve. That evening, they sat on her porch, sharing Chinese takeout. The scent of sweet and sour chicken mingled with the fragrant night air. They laughed, truly laughed, for the first time in what felt like forever, sharing stories of their lives, careful to skirt around the painful parts. Samuel spoke of his retirement, the novel he was trying to write. It's about a man, he explained, who gets a second chance with the woman he should have fought harder for. His eyes held hers for a long moment, the unspoken words hanging beautifully in the twilight. Eleanor felt a blush rise to her cheeks. She steered the conversation away, though a warmth settled in her heart. Where do you think Julian is tonight? She asked, her voice tinged with weariness, knowing the answer already. He was, no doubt, with Sarah, the young nurse from the hospital. It doesn't matter, Eleanor, Samuel said, his tone firm. What he's doing, where he is, it's about him, not you. I'm just so tired of fighting, Samuel, she confessed, leaning back in her chair, the day's events weighing heavily. I want this chapter with Julian to be over, but I need to be stronger first. Physically, emotionally, then I'll deal with him. And you will be stronger, Samuel assured her, his gaze unwavering. And you will deal with him, and remember, his behavior is a consequence of his character, not your choice. You are good, Eleanor. Just then the familiar hum of Julian's car pulled into the driveway. His headlights swept across the porch, illuminating Samuel, sitting comfortably at Eleanor's side. Julian's face, usually so composed, flickered with surprise, then a shadow of annoyance. He paused, clearly taken aback, before slowly approaching. Julian, Eleanor said, her voice flat, this is Samuel Peterson, an old friend. Julian offered a stiff, hesitant hand. Julian Hayes. Samuel Peterson, Samuel replied, shaking Julian's hand with a polite but firm grip. His eyes, direct and knowing, met Julian's. I'm here to donate bone marrow to Eleanor. Julian's practiced composure cracked. His jaw tightened, and his eyes darted from Samuel to Eleanor, a flash of surprise, quickly followed by a deepening shade of shame. The implication of Samuel's statement, the stark contrast it drew between a long-lost friend's selfless act and his own calculated neglect, hung heavy in the air. Without another word, Julian mumbled a vague excuse about a late meeting and retreated into the house, disappearing into the guest room, leaving them alone once more. I'm sorry, Samuel, Eleanor said, a sigh escaping her lips. That was awkward. Samuel merely waved a dismissive hand. Don't apologize for his discomfort, Eleanor. It's his own doing. Now you need to get some rest. Big day tomorrow. His concern was, as always, solely for her. The next morning, the house was quiet as Eleanor prepared for the hospital. Julian emerged from his room just as she was about to leave, his face unreadable. Good luck today, Eleanor, he said, his voice devoid of genuine warmth. I'll try to stop by later. The promise felt hollow, a perfunctory gesture to maintain appearances. He left quickly, disappearing into the morning traffic. Samuel watched him go, a frown on his face. He's not even coming with you? Eleanor shrugged, a familiar ache in her chest. He's busy, Samuel. Work. She defended him, a reflex born of decades of habit, even as she knew the truth. He was busy, but not with work. He was busy with Sarah. At the hospital, the atmosphere was buzzing with a renewed sense of urgency and hope. Dr. Hayes met them, his face beaming. Eleanor, Samuel, it's truly remarkable. The compatibility tests are even better than we initially thought. A perfect match. This is a medical miracle, the kind we write about in journals. His excitement was infectious, filling the sterile hallway with a rare warmth. For the first time, Eleanor allowed herself to truly believe that a healthy future, was possible. Samuel, your generosity is truly rare, Dr. Hayes said, a respectful awe in his voice as he looked from Eleanor to Samuel. To be such a perfect match and to step up as a non-family donor, it's exceptional. Samuel, standing tall beside Eleanor, simply smiled. Eleanor is family, Dr. Hayes, he stated, his eyes meeting hers with unwavering warmth. Just not by DNA. The unspoken sentiment in his gaze filled Eleanor with a comforting certainty that transcended any genetic bond. As Eleanor was prepped for her own procedure, a wave of terror washed over her. Her body, already weakened by months of chemotherapy, felt vulnerable, exposed. Clara, sensing her fear, leaned in close. Your body will welcome his bone marrow, Eleanor, she whispered, her voice soothing. It's like it's coming home, it knows. Clara's words, imbued with a gentle wisdom, offered a surprising comfort, a quiet reassurance that this foreign, vital gift would integrate, would become her. Hours later, as Eleanor drifted into the pre-anesthesia haze, she heard Dr. Hayes' voice, distant but clear. Samuel's procedure was flawless. He's awake and recovering well. A small smile touched her lips. He was okay. When she woke briefly, still groggy, she was wheeled into Samuel's recovery room. He looked pale, but his eyes, though tired, held their familiar kindness. You did it, Eleanor, he whispered, his voice raspy. I'm so proud of your courage. He took her hand, his grip weak but firm. Helping you, it's one of the most meaningful experiences of my life. He promised, I'll be right here when you fully wake up. And then Eleanor drifted back to sleep, a profound sense of peace settling over her. She awoke properly a day later, the harsh hospital light feeling less oppressive. A strange, unfamiliar energy hummed within her. She felt different, not just physically, but internally, as if a vital spark had been reignited. Dr. Hayes visited shortly after, his face alight. The infusion went perfectly, Eleanor. The cells are taking. This is a new beginning for you. For the next week, Samuel was a constant, comforting presence by her bedside. He brought her books, read aloud when she was too weak to focus, told her stories of his life in the quiet coastal town, and simply sat with her, his silent presence, a powerful antidote to the loneliness she had known for so long. He arranged for his own recovery to continue in her city, ensuring he could stay close. Julian, true to his word, visited twice. Both times his visits were brief, punctuated by superficial, small talk about her health, the hospital food, the weather. He offered a quick, perfunctory kiss to her forehead, avoiding eye contact, before quickly making an excuse to leave. His presence felt hollow, a charade, confirming Eleanor's earlier realization that he was simply going through the motions. Meanwhile, Samuel's phone, which he kept nearby, rang constantly. Friends, colleagues, and even former students called, showering him with well wishes, expressing their admiration for his selfless act. He took every call, always ending them with a warm smile, often saying, "Thank you, that means a lot. Eleanor is doing wonderfully, by the way." One afternoon, after hanging up with a particularly effusive former student, he turned to Eleanor, a soft smile on his face. "Anyone who cares about me, Eleanor," he said, his voice dropping to a gentle murmur, "is going to care about you, because I love you." The words, spoken so simply, yet with such profound sincerity, hung in the air between them. Eleanor's heart pounded. She had known in the quiet corners of her mind that his feelings ran deep, but to hear it articulated now in this sterile hospital room was overwhelming. "Samuel," she began, her voice hoarse, "what does this mean? When I'm better, will you just go back to your life? And me, do I go back to Julian?" The thought of returning to her loveless, neglectful marriage was suffocating. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "No, it's not what I want." Samuel reached for her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers. "Eleanor," he said, his eyes filled with an intensity that took her breath away. "I have loved you since we were 16 years old. I never stopped. Victoria knew it, and she made me promise to be there for you. We both settled for lives that weren't truly happy, Eleanor. I did after you chose Julian, and you did with him." He paused, his thumb gently stroking her skin. "But we don't have to anymore. We have a second chance, Eleanor, a chance at real happiness, a chance to stop settling." Eleanor looked at him, truly looked at him, and saw not just the boy she had once loved, but the man he had become, kind, courageous, unwavering in his affection. The fear of the unknown was still there, a whisper in the back of her mind, but it was overshadowed by a burgeoning sense of hope, a realization that she deserved happiness, a love that was true and unconditional. She squeezed his hand. She would choose love. She would choose Samuel. She would tell him tomorrow. 3 months later, the words Eleanor had yearned to hear for so long finally came. In remission. Her recovery, Dr. Hayes explained, was nothing short of remarkable, a testament not only to the medical compatibility of the transplant, but also, Eleanor felt, to the renewed spirit Samuel had awakened within her. She was healing, truly healing, in ways medical science couldn't entirely measure. Samuel, true to his gentle commitment, had extended his stay indefinitely. He'd found a small apartment nearby, a temporary base, but his presence in Eleanor's life was undeniably permanent. Their days settled into a rhythm of shared comfort and quiet joy. They worked on small domestic projects together, slowly but surely reclaiming Eleanor's neglected home. Samuel, with his practical skills and patient demeanor, repaired a leaky faucet, mended a broken fence, and most significantly helped Eleanor revive her long-abandoned garden. The act of nurturing life from the soil felt profoundly symbolic. Julian, meanwhile, barely registered Samuel's presence, a ghost flitting between his guest room and his increasingly late returns. In fact, he seemed almost relieved by Samuel's presence, as if it absolved him of any lingering responsibility. His affair with Sarah continued, less discreet now, an open secret that Eleanor no longer cared to hide or confront. His indifference, once a source of deep pain, now simply underscored the irrelevance of his role in her future. Clara, her kind nurse, observed Eleanor's transformation during a follow-up visit. "Eleanor," she remarked, her eyes twinkling, "you're not just healthy, you're truly happy. There's a glow about you that's more than just good health." Eleanor smiled, a genuine, radiant smile that reached her eyes. "I am, Clara. For the first time in years, I'm exactly where I want to be." One evening, Julian, looking unusually somber, approached Eleanor in the living room. "Eleanor," he began, his voice strained, "I think we need to talk about our future. I think it's time we consider a divorce." He braced himself for a fight, for tears, for recriminations. But Eleanor simply looked at him, her gaze clear and steady. "I agree, Julian," she said, her voice calm, devoid of the emotional turmoil he expected. "Though I must say, your timing, after everything I've been through, is truly callous." Her words, delivered without anger, simply laid bare the truth of his character. "And for the record, I know about Sarah." Julian flinched, his composure faltering. "Sarah? What are you talking about? And what about Samuel? He's practically moved in." His defensiveness was immediate, a desperate attempt to deflect. Eleanor merely shook her head. "Samuel," she stated, her voice imbued with a quiet power. "Samuel's love for me is honest, Julian. It's a stark contrast to your calculated selfishness, your emotional abandonment, when I was fighting for my life." She spoke without bitterness, simply stating facts. There was nothing left to fight for, no wound left to inflict. The truth was enough. Julian, defeated, turned and left the house, not just for the guest room, but for good. As the front door clicked shut, a profound sense of lightness washed over Eleanor. She felt free, truly free, for the first time in decades. Yet a flicker of trepidation remained. Building a new, healthy relationship after so much pain and neglect felt like stepping into uncharted territory. Samuel, sensing her apprehension, found her on the porch swing. "Are you scared?" he asked gently. Eleanor nodded. "A little. What if this is just trauma bonding? What if I'm not ready for something real?" Samuel took her hand, his eyes filled with reassurance. "Eleanor, I've seen you, really seen you, for decades. This isn't trauma bonding. This is about two people who always saw something special in each other, finally getting a chance to build something real. You've always been visible to me, and you are ready for something real." His words settled her heart. "I want a fresh start, Samuel," she confessed, looking around her familiar home, now imbued with bittersweet memories. "I want to sell this house, find somewhere new, somewhere that's just mine to begin with." She turned to him, a nervous hope in her eyes. Would you consider looking for a place together once I've found my footing on my own 2 feet?" Samuel's smile was tender. "I'd love nothing more, Eleanor. I'll be right here, every step of the way." 6 months later, their search led them to a small cottage by the sea, complete with an overgrown but promising garden. It was a modest place but filled with light, a blank canvas for their new life. They would fix it up together, cultivating both the garden and their future. Seed by precious seed. One afternoon, as they sat on the porch of their new cottage, the phone rang. It was Chloe, her voice still laced with a lingering, almost habitual worry. "Mom, are you really happy? Are you sure about Samuel?" Eleanor smiled, a serene and confident smile. "Chloe," she said, looking at Samuel, who was tending to a rose bush, his back to her, "I've never been happier. Samuel loves me, truly, profoundly. I've been given a second chance, my dear. A second chance at a life I was meant to cherish." The sun warmed her face, and Eleanor knew with absolute certainty that she was home.